Welcome to our Big 12 preview, the one true Big 12 preview of all of the internet. We're here in front of the New York City Public Library. Ghostbusters happened here.
My favorite documentary.
His favorite documentary. Ryan, what is your big story of the Big 12?
I am very interested to see what happens with year 2 of Charlie Strong in Texas.
Yeah.
Year 1, kind of a mixed bag. They didn't necessarily have a big signature win that they could hang their hat on.
Right.
Showed some development and then got destroyed in their bowl game,
Yes.
which is a great way to end the season. But that was a year that I think we all expected.
To be expected, yeah.
Transition. The expectations weren't necessarily super high.
Right.
Year 2, it kind of feels like this is where, given how well he's recruited in his short time in Austin, the Longhorns need to take a big step forward, whether that's hanging with one of the top teams in a close game, whether that's beating a rival in a really good game, something like that. But I think that's going to be kind of the story I'll be focused on.
And of course, Strong and his staff having a full offseason to sort of evaluate where they can get better, where they did well. For me, it's TCU, as close to, I think, as we have in the conference to a finished product.
Yeah.
Just because of everybody that they return, coaching staff included. The offensive course takes huge strides last year. Trevon Boykin goes from, is he going to start? Is he going to switch positions? To, is he the best quarterback in the country?
Is he a Heisman candidate? Yeah.
Exactly. And so with what they return on offense, Colby Listenby, who's just a complete blazer. The backfield is back. Defensively, obviously, Paul Dawson, a big loss, but they bring back so much in that 4-2-5 system. You have to feel good about TCU. Of course, they have the hurdle at the end of the season with Baylor. I guess we'll get into that a little bit later. But that, to me, is so huge to have a TCU team like this, which is finally the sort of realization of the great fast defense with the sort of adjusted air raid offense.
Absolutely.
Cannot wait. To you, who is the riser in this conference to get to that top level?
I'll go out on a bit of a limb and say it's Oklahoma.
Okay.
Disappointing year last year, but they only really had one loss to a team that they shouldn't have lost.
Right, it was
probably
a
that
really
Oklahoma
screwy
State
year.
game.
Yeah.
Other than that, you say they made a bunch of changes on the coaching staff, most of which I think are good, especially bringing in Lincoln Riley.
Yeah.
The quarterback situation is anybody's guess right now, but he has 4 to choose from. He's got, he's got Trevor Knight, who's already got experience at Oklahoma. They got Baker Mayfield, who's run similar offense before. And I just think this is the year where all of the weird and bad things that happened to them last year, at some point that luck has to flip on.
Sort of like what happened with TCU from 2013, 2014. My riser, I think, is Oklahoma State. Just because when you can come into a season feeling optimistic about a young quarterback, especially with how much turnover they had last season, I think they're going to be better along the offensive line, which was terrible last season. They add some reinforcement at running back. I think Oklahoma State is going to get to the point where everything's not going to go wrong, which is already an improvement over last season. I think with the offensive coordinator, another year in that system and sort of implementing his own system. I think Oklahoma State, especially given their schedule, nobody in the non-conference, almost all their important home games come at home. All of their important games are at home. So I feel good about the Cowboys that so much of it is going to be happening in Stillwater.
And they've got a ton of returning starters, which is very different from last year when it was like, we have these 4 guys.
All right, then, so who falls from where they were last season?
This feels very mean to say, considering it's not like they had a great season last year, but I don't think Texas Tech has reached the bottom yet.
They're sort of on the basement stairs?
Yeah, they're just
roll down?
They've sort of bounced off the walls a little more, but there's 2 more flights they didn't know were there. I mean, last year they were 3-1 in games decided by 1 score, so already they've taken advantage of winning the 50-50 games. Other than that, they just sort of got their butts handed to them pretty much the whole season. They have a very tough stretch to open the season. They play UTEP, Arkansas. I don't know. I don't have a great feeling that even though they brought in David Gibbs from Houston, who was very good at creating that turnover-generating defense, they were so bad in the secondary last year that even if he can make them a little bit better, I don't think it's necessarily enough to change the outcome for them this year right now.
They certainly have interesting skill talent, but there's so much more depth and just talent is needed in Lubbock. To me, it's West Virginia, even though the second half of their season was supremely disappointing. They gave Baylor and TCU everything they could handle.
They did.
Maybe too much in terms of Baylor. But this year, with the losses on both sides of the ball, Tom Bradley going to UCLA certainly helped sort of reform that defense after it was a disaster a couple of years ago. And then, of course, with Mario Alford and Kevin White gone, and Clint Trickett gone, and a road schedule that's just completely brutal. I believe it's Baylor, TCU, and Oklahoma on the road. It just seems natural, and Skylar Howard certainly is talented, and
so is Russell Shell.
So is Russell Shell, but just it's so much this season to climb. I like that they returned defensively, a number of talented guys, but it's a lot to ask with that much turnover.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, give me a player's name that perhaps isn't household at the moment, but will become October.
I really like Elijah Lee. He's was playing defensive end for Kansas State last season, but was only on the field in third down passing situations.
Sure.
As a true freshman, got 4.5 sacks in that very limited role. They've moved him to outside linebacker now, and he looked very, very good in the spring game. Had a bunch of tackles, had a pick six. Granted, that was against the K-State offense, which is not the most terrifying, but he is a player who I think the more he learns how to play in that defense, he has demonstrated that he has a lot of natural talent, and it's fun that they're now going to take this guy who caused havoc in very small amounts last year and say, go do it on every down.
If nothing else, at Kansas State, you know he's going to develop into, at the very least, a fundamentally sound defensive player, and with a ceiling basically a star. Just because that happens year in and year out. To me, I went for under the radar. I really wanted to do this. You could take any number of quarterbacks in this conference because it's basically just Trevon Boykin.
Who knows who they are, more or less.
I'm going with Laquan McGowan, who has been the off-season star of the Big 12. 400 plus pounds.
Literally not under anything.
There is nothing he is under. Perhaps the moon. He is under the moon.
I'll give you that.
But at 400 pounds, he plays guard along the offensive line, but is going to continue to line up as an eligible receiver in certain formations in a completely unguardable, unblockable, undefendable.
This school bus is tight end.
Have fun with this safety. 1/3 of his size, safety. So I enjoy that, especially with Seth Russell taking over that offense. Presumably, he has so many weapons, and now he has all sorts of weapons combined into one super weapon. He has the Death Star. What to you is a game now that you're looking at the schedule that is going to be fun, decide the conference that you have circled?
This is the easiest question we've done in any of these previews.
Iowa State, Kansas.
That's the one. TCU, Baylor.
Okay.
I mean, last year was such a good game. Obviously, depending on which side of it you were, you have different feelings about the officiating. Although, actually, I think both sides pretty much hated the officiating. But I don't think there's any reason to say that won't be the game that decides who is the Big 12's champion this year. And the fact that it comes so late, it's TCU's last game of the season, it's Baylor's penultimate game. It has all the makings of this is going to be a game that has massive, massive playoff implications.
This is true. I've circled Texas, Oklahoma State. It's Texas's first conference game, Oklahoma State's first conference.
As well.
So they have their non-conference slate. Oklahoma State is lesser than Texas is. But we are going to have a complete idea, I would say, at that point of what Texas is, what they need to be, what they shouldn't be. They have Cal and Notre Dame early on in the schedule. So that's going to be a great sort of litmus test.
Barometer,
it's going to be a barometer of where Texas is and what they need to do. There's all sorts of talent on both sides of the ball, albeit a little bit young for Texas, and also with Oklahoma State, where they're at. So I think, it could be the game that decides which one of these teams is back into that top-level discussion in the Big 12, particularly early on in the season, which I enjoy.
If both of our risers pan out, Bedlam this year is going to be a very fun game.
It almost always is anyway.
Almost always is,
but yes, all right, that is our Big 12 preview. Let us know what we skipped, what we should not have talked about. It's going to be a fun year in the Big 12 because, again, one true champion. One true champion. Thanks for watching. See you soon.